Leanne, interestingly enough, that further around what could be set to be announced out of Japan by means of more stimulus, a snap election, a deferral, if not a total freeze on any sales tax hike. It's not coming through onto this market. Are you surprised at that?
It is quite surprising, Carson, that we aren't seeing that trickling across, but we might in fact start to see a bit of momentum coming or picking up coming into the afternoon's trade. It will be interesting to watch out and see what does happen. But as you say, our market does continue to seem like it is struggling. We did open up quite strongly this morning off the back of those fairly positive leads that we had from overseas markets, of course, mostly shrugging off the fact that Japan has now trickled into a recession. But as you said, losing a lot of momentum. We've had very quiet economic data out today. Of course, we had the RBA minutes out earlier, but as you said, no real positive surprises coming in out of that, no new commentary. So we actually didn't get too much movement in the market at that point. And it really is that materials sector and that financial sector that is weighing on the market. We are seeing some selling outside of the major banks. In that materials sector, it's quite interesting. Gold was relatively flat overnight, but we are actually seeing some of those gold stocks holding up quite strongly. But as you said earlier, Fortescue really taking a hit today, as well as BC Iron. So those two iron ore players really continuing to put pressure on that iron ore sector and those mining stocks. So we certainly will be keeping an eye on those ones. The sectors that are leading higher or sort of in flat territory at the moment is that energy sector and of course that IT sector. And again, that's quite surprising given that we did see relatively flat to negative oil prices coming through overnight. So it will be interesting to see whether we can pick up some of this momentum coming into the afternoon. I do suspect it will be quite interesting seeing the performance around the region and seeing whether that can translate across onto our market.
A mini rally for Ruralco, that's RHL, the ticket code, clear by about 1 3/4%. Some numbers today. Interesting, the dividend, if you compare that on year, is actually less than it was, right? But still, looking at NPAT, pretty rosy set of numbers.
That's exactly right, Carson. If we do have a look at those numbers, they actually do look very strong. Those underlying net profits up 78% and those underlying earnings up 48%. So very strong in terms of those numbers. As you say, the dividend wasn't too surprising or too outstanding, but I think overall it does look like a fairly strong result that's come through, particularly given the fact that Ruralco has been suffering from a lot of those drought conditions across northern and also southern Australia as well. So particularly looking at those areas that drove the strength, though, their rural supplies, their agency activities, so that's their livestock business as well as their real estate business and also their water services. So overall, it did look like a strong result. If we look at that outlook commentary, which of course is always positive, well, we need to keep an eye on that one. The company did say that, of course, they do need some rainfall in order to combat a lot of those drought conditions, but they are actually optimistic in terms of their momentum continuing coming into the first half of FY15. So that actually looks fairly positive in terms of their outlook commentary. And overall, we actually do remain quite optimistic on the outlook for this stock, particularly looking at their leverage to that livestock trade, their growing live export business as well. And also we are starting to see an improvement in their balance sheet position. So it does look like they are starting to come back and picking up some of that strength. Certainly seeing that market reacting quite strongly today off quite a strong result, as I mentioned.
Other than that, REA today looking to do what it's been doing here so spectacularly well in the United States. So teaming up with News Corp in terms of the co-owner here in this equation. What do you make of this move on move? Pun intended.
It does look positive, Carson. We are seeing a positive reaction in both REA Group and News Corp today. So today actually confirming that that acquisition of Move has been completed over in the US. So News Corp is actually going to be holding an 80% stake. They've paid about $950 million for their stake in the company. If we look at REA Group, of course, they will be holding the other 20% stake. They've paid about $200 million in the company. Since the announcement actually came through back on the 29th of September. We've seen REA Group up about 2.8% or so, but we have actually seen News Corp down about 9.5%, potentially in relation to the capital outlay that has been involved for this company. But I do think overall the acquisition actually does look positive for both companies. It does confirm that News Corp is committed to their global and their online expansion. They are expecting that their online real estate business will be one of their strongest pillars. News Corp will in fact become one of the leading players in that growing real estate sector over in the US, and of course that is continuing to gain full momentum and probably yet to regain a lot of its potency as well over there. And of course, looking at REA Group, really continuing a lot of their expansion plans as well. We do know that they hold a leading position over here in Australia, but they also operate online real estate businesses or websites over in Europe, China, and recently in Southeast Asia as well. So certainly a positive acquisition adding to that portfolio. So in our mind, it does actually look positive for both companies, particularly looking at that online real estate business over in the US, and certainly seeing quite a positive reaction from investors today.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Carson.